All right. So tonight I want to discuss American Planning Association's new publication on their Housing Supply Accelerator Playbook. I also want to talk about the potential for Milwaukee turning a downtown urban highway into a boulevard, in kind of a recent report that discussed the economics benefits of that, as well as potential expansion for SunRail in Orlando. So I'm going to share my screen to discuss the housing playbook. And this was published by the American Planning Association in conjunction with, I think it was, the National League of Cities. So at least local governments were involved with the American Planning Association and thinking about how cities and towns can increase housing production. So it's worth a read. There's no obviously silver bullet to kind of solve the housing crisis in the United States, but it starts off talking about how really the way forward isn't exclusively through removing local control away from cities and towns, which I appreciated. It a lot of times people have been looking to state governments to step in and really kind of preempt cities and towns from adopting their own ordinances that impact housing. But this kind of takes a broader perspective to find new ways for cities and towns across America to increase housing. So I just wanted to briefly go over a couple of their ideas here. If we go down to, I'll put the link to this report in the video description. But its first strategy is really getting key stakeholders together. So it's one of its first recommendations, identifying all the different stakeholders who are involved in housing production in your community. So this is the people who finance housing. These are the city, the state, and any federal organizations that are within your city and state that are involved in housing production. This also includes, like micro builders and housing developers, anybody building housing, really, bringing them to the table and really trying to attack the goal of what the American Planning Association considers a shortage of 4 million housing units in the United States. So that's really why this report was created. It's the idea that the United States is 4 million housing units short. So how can housing production be accelerated? An interesting graphic this report has is breaks out the hurdles by region. So I think people might find this interesting. When you look at the Northeast, right? So it shows construction obstacles is 32% of the hurdles in the Northeast. It's only 27% in the West. And then when you look at land use, zoning, and permitting obstacles, that's also highest in the Northeast. This makes sense because the Northeast was developed so much earlier than the West, the South, and the Midwest. So that's not really surprising to me. There's also less financing challenges. They're all about the same, but less financing challenges in the West. And then political or community opposition seems to be highest in the West. This also makes sense because of how less developed the West is compared to the extremely dense Northeast corridor. So there's just less land available for building. So when I think something's being built in the West, I'm imagining like California, Oregon, and Washington State, there just being a lot of land that people might have been used to. So seeing new housing being built in those areas might be upsetting. And then they really kind of break down the the strategies into um, three main buckets of strategies. One's financing. One is, let me scroll down to it. All right, yeah. So collaboration and partnership, construction and develop, finance, and let's see, land use regulations. So collaboration and partnership. Again, I mentioned this earlier. It's finding these stakeholders. So local governments, community planners, residential builders, real estate professionals, public housing authorities, local public policy or philanthropic organizations, state housing agencies. Excuse me. Bringing all these stakeholders to the table and starting with that plan. Like, what's the comprehensive plan for your area, for your city? What's your housing action plan? How does that relate to your state? All right, construction and development. Here are 13 strategies to support construction and development. Let's see. All right. Okay, so one is to engage housing stakeholders. Two, identify gaps, obstacles, and opportunities in building permit processes. Um, when you read through this, it has some really great case studies, and one of them is some cities like Portland, Oregon, does a survey. So if you imagine everybody who obtained a building permit from a city or town, and then they um, are able to provide a survey on their experience. So that way, if you have that each year, you can identify at least some feedback from really the people you're serving and identify different challenges in this process. So that way, you can have some measurable data to improve upon. And it's good to hear from your user base as well. So also reviewing internal operations. I think that's really helpful to have that like self audit to see if the organizations kind of approving these permits, if they can really see if they can have more efficient processes. Evaluate and improve, streamline the city's development process. 5, facilitate development, small scale residential projects. Promote and facilitate infill development. One of the case studies provided here is it is South Bend right here. So South Bend, Indiana, actually has pre-approved, ready-to-build housing. So you can go to City Hall, you can see the different sites, and then you can pick your housing model. And this document will tell you which zoning districts this type of house is permitted in. So you can pick a 1 bed, 1 bath. This is in each of these 4 types of housing units are allowed in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different zoning districts. You can see it in this upper right-hand corner. And then these units are allowed in different other zoning districts. So it's cool to see what different cities and towns across the United States are doing. But this is one way. So that way, this I think helps the someone who's not a large scale developer, maybe someone just building 1 or 2 homes. They have a vacant lot next door, or they have a larger lot. They're going to subdivide it, and then they can get the plans from City Hall and say, "Yep, I'll build this type of house," and they'll have the comfort of knowing that it's a type of house that would be approved, and hopefully the architecture matches the character of the neighborhood. Otherwise, the city wouldn't kind of endorse the type of design. So you can kind of have some type of expectation that it's going to fit based on its size and density with the neighborhood. Some other strategies: create programs to support new and emerging small-scale developers. I think we just talked about that. Adopt innovative residential construction technologies and partner with organizations. So yeah, if you're interested, this document goes into depth, providing case studies in different cities and towns across the United States on each of these 13 strategies. So it's a totally free PDF. You can download it, kind of and explore it yourself. When it comes to finance, they have 17 strategies. Develop a funding strategy, use federal, state, and use federal and state housing funding. And then number 4 is to leverage federal infrastructure funding. 5 and 6 discuss using FEMA funding for disaster resilience, and then also funding for post-disaster rebuilding. 7, investigate intercommunity collaboration for housing, planning, and financing. Number 8, leverage public-private partnerships. Number 9, partner with financial institutions. 10, use proven gap financing strategies. And 11, explore alternative financing strategies. Yeah, and looking through it, a lot of this it's difficult for cities and towns to really take on, because so much of these, I think cities and towns can kind of do more in that first phase of kind of connecting the stakeholders, and then also on the last phase of the land use and regulatory systems. So they can kind of look at the process and procedures of how housing is approved, and then also they can look at the regulations. But when it comes to the financing, that's going to be, significantly in the private sector and in the nonprofit world, and in the relationships with those state and federal housing organizations. But to a larger extent, it's going to be that development community. All right, so the land use and regulation section of this report has 14 strategies. So planning for increasing housing supply, creating enhanced housing elements of comprehensive plans, updating restrictive lot building form and requirements, restrictive lot building form, context requirements, and design standards. Number 7, analyze and update property use regulations, taking an inventory of zoning regulations, exploring how to update zoning districts to promote housing supply, facilitate housing supply into new plans for downtown, take more flexible approach to non-conforming uses, speed or streamline processes for housing development review and approval, update building codes to meet evolving community needs, use regulatory and policy tools to preserve and improve existing housing options, identify existing housing in other areas susceptible to climate hazards, and 14 is to strategically coordinate land use regulations. Again, I think the benefit to this document is really looking at a case-by-case study, because these are real city examples that might spark some ideas for people working in different municipalities. But overall, it's nothing crazy in here. It's a lot of it is things that, if you're familiar with the American Planning Association, it's stuff that they've been consistently publishing. So I'll leave that link to the PDF. It's about a 90-page PDF, but it's it's a quick read. You can just kind of pop into the different sections that you're interested in, and take a look at some of the strategies that are more applicable to you. All right. So next cool headline this past week was an economic study that discussed converting Interstate 794 into a boulevard could yield 3,000 housing units and over $1 billion in development. So this is Rethink 794 is an organization that did the whole economic case study. So they looked into they looked into what would happen if you took this interstate here, 794. So we're in Milwaukee, and it's a interstate that goes right through the downtown, as you can see in Google Maps right here. So what would this look like if it was a boulevard instead of an elevated highway? So you can see what it looks like today. And the organization, Rethink 794, um, they have some really good visuals on their website. So these are the renderings that they're putting out, um, going to a street level boulevard to reconnect to the grid in Milwaukee, and then turning the freeway area into, public parks, public space, and private development. And this is what it looks like today. And then some other good renderings they have, trying to get people to imagine it as a neighborhood, is this today, and then what they think it could be. And then another great street level view of this as well today, and then if the street was a boulevard. So on Instagram, I really enjoy posting content like this, and an example of taking a highway and turning it into a boulevard isn't unique. So in Boston, granted, the Big Dig went underground, there's a tunnel, but in 2002, this is what it looked like. So you have an elevated freeway going down the center in the middle of Boston. And then after the tunnel was built, the Big Dig, right, now you can get through the city underground. They turned the surface level road network into a boulevard. So this is what it looks like in Boston. Providence moved their highway, so they relocated their highway. It used to go through the center of downtown, and now it's just south over the water. And this is what it looked like in 2007. And then the highway was removed, and now you have a pedestrian bridge, and you really unlocked a lot of private investment in public green space in downtown Providence. So it's had success. I know Seattle with their viaduct over. They put in a tunnel as well, and now the surface level road where the double-decker viaduct was is now the Alaska Way Viaduct is a boulevard. And there's complaints about the boulevard now, right? It might not be the most pedestrian friendly, but it's certainly an improvement from the interstate that really went through the center of their downtown. And then an example from in the opposite direction, in Kansas City, you can see what the community looked like before the highway went through their downtown. And this is just south of their downtown. And then 2002, you can see this highway going through this neighborhood. And this is often what happened, right? They would build highways. The federal government and state governments would put these highways in areas where, disproportionately impact people with lower incomes and minorities. So this is really an example of what happens when you have an intact neighborhood and then it turns into highway. So you can kind of try to capture that by going in reverse here. And this is what Milwaukee's thinking about doing. And the economic study was interesting because it talks about how obviously that type of development lends itself to transportation oriented development, right? You have a boulevard, you remove that highway, which is a total eyesore. It's just really a blight there. And then you really activate it with life by reconnecting that grid. If we can pull it up on the map, it has a nice grid network. So this could all really be reimagined, and it's cool that Wisconsin's DOT is actively thinking about it, and that there's organizations really on a mission to make it happen. So again, it's not unique. It's cool to look at different cities who have done it successfully. Seattle, Boston, Providence, I think areas of Buffalo. So yeah. All right. And then I wanted to talk about SunRail's potential expansion. So we have, let me see here. All right, SunRail expansion venue. SunRail expansion and venue upgrades set to revolutionize transit and entertainment in Orange County. So SunRail is really this map. I think. Yep. So it's in Orlando, Florida, and it has its flaws, right? It only runs north south. It's only runs Monday through Friday. It's not connected to the airport, to Orlando International Airport, and it's not connected to Disney. So right away, you can kind of see some of the issues with probably its ridership. It's if it's not connected to some of the most significant employment centers, and it's not connected to the airport, and it's not connected to the most significant tourist centers, it's missing a market, right? So they're in talks for expanding. So let me play this clip. This is interesting, talking about their latest expansion.
To the Orange County Board of Commissioners this morning, proposed new routes would cover different parts of Central Florida, especially the tourist areas, including Disney and Universal.
This option would be able to create connections for not just the visitors that want to go to those places, because those locations are the highest attractors of visitors right here in Central Florida, but they're also some of the largest employers in Central Florida as well. So people need to work there. They're looking for multimodal options to get to work.
The plan involves expanding SunRail to connect Orlando International Airport, then west to the Orange County Convention Center, and eventually southwest to International Drive and the Disney Springs area. I'm here on Epic Boulevard. This is...
So, yeah, that's it seems to make sense to try to expand it in an east-west orientation, and then really connect that rail to the places where people might want to use it for, right? And if you think about whenever I go to Florida, if I go to Orlando, whenever I've been to Disney, the first thing you do is you have to rent a car, right? So if you have expanded rail, that makes it convenient to get from the airport to your hotel, or convenient to get from the airport to Disney, because once you're on a Disney property, usually you're pretty well taken care of. You could take a lot of vehicles off the road and reduce congestion in Central Florida. So it seems like obviously funding is always an uphill climb when it comes to these types of projects, because of how much they cost. So I think there's about 3 or 4 different counties in Florida that are involved in this. They're going to be looking for federal government to help fund the expansion, but there's a lot of potential to expand and to really increase the number of users. So it's exciting times for transit in Florida. All right, so I'll link the American Planning Association's Housing Playbook in the video description, and also the article on discussing Milwaukee turning their downtown highway, or one of them, into a boulevard, adding housing, and the study that found that could increase the number of housing units by about 3,000, could also result in about $1 billion worth of private investment in downtown Milwaukee, and then also on SunRail's potential expansion of their train system.